In previous videos, we looked at the calculation for the revenue, so using our percentage completion method. And in a second video, we looked at the journal entries, so you see them on the screen right now. So all the journal entries to record our contract on our financial statements. And now the last step is to record the statement of financial position, so we're going to do this. We can proceed in one of two ways. Your statement of financial position would be prepared from your journal entry, so we can reference the journal entry numbers. Alternatively, we can go straight to the problem data right here and pick out our numbers. Now I'm going to do it from the journal entries just to make sure that the process is similar to what you would find in your accounting system. So just before we start, I'm going to copy over our data right here. So our years, just going to copy that over right here. So that's our 3 years, 2014, 15, and 16. And so we have our statement of financial position layout. So we have the accounts receivable, and then in the inventory section we have construction in progress and progress billings. So in the first case, our accounts receivable would come from journal entry number 2 when we have our billings at $4 million. And then during the same year, we collected cash of $3.5 million, giving us an ending balance of $500,000. So that gives us our accounts receivable. We have two entries affecting accounts receivable. Our construction in process comes from our contract costs, so the first journal entry. And then through our journal entry, we added to this account our gross profit from the contract. And that's because our construction in process under the percentage completion method is a hybrid account, and that it tracks not only contract costs, but it also tracks the gross profit. So essentially what this gives us is the revenue, and it reflects the true receivable on the contract. So we did work worth $4.4 million. We collected $3.5 million, and so that gives us, so that's our billings, $3.5 million. Sorry, that's our cash. Our billings was $4 million. And so what we end up having is work valued at $4.4 million minus billings of $4 million. So this is the receivable of $400,000 and receivable of $500,000 sitting in accounts receivable. So total receivable at the end of the year is $900,000, but it's split up into two components. Even though we did work at $4.4 million, we could only invoice $4 million as per our contract. So that means that there's an extra $400,000 in value of work that is not yet invoiceable. So under accounting rules, though, it's receivable because it's the value of the work we did. It's collectible from the customer, but we haven't yet invoiced the customer. So it's receivable but not yet invoiceable and not yet collectible from the customer. Whereas the $500,000 came from the invoices we submitted of $4 million. So our progress billings minus the cash we collected. So that's a collectible, and usually within 30 days of invoicing, we're going to collect this amount in cash. So our receivable for year 2, well, it's balance sheet accounts and they're permanent. So the ending balance of 2014 carries over. And then to this, we add the billings for 2015 right here, so billings, and then minus cash collections of 2015, giving us a balance of $1.3 million. We see the same number in our data because it's cumulative. It's our billings to date minus the cash collected to date. So $6.3 million in billings minus cash of $5 million right here. So that carries over in accounts receivable. With our construction in process, it's our opening balance plus new contract costs in 2015 right here, plus our gross profit for 2015 of $35,000. So essentially cumulative revenue. And progress billings, and we have to add to this our beginning balance of $4 million. Whoops, sorry, a little error in my formula. Let me just clear that up. Equals progress billings from the previous year And then the progress billings from the current year, 2.3 million, 6.3 million in progress billings, which matches our data right here at the top of 6.3 million in billings to date. And that gives us 1.5 million as the excess of contract costs over billings. And then in the last year, opening balance plus new invoices minus cash collected. And in this case here, we collected all the cash, so there's no balance left at the end. We repeat the process with our construction in process, plus new contract costs, plus a gross profit, $11 million. And we do the same thing with our progress billings. I'm showing them as negative because they're a contra asset account. So my billings right here, 4.7 million. Oops, have an error again in my formula. There we go, $11 million. So let me just put a minus in front of this. And our contract is finished. Now there is one additional entry. Our contract is finished, but we're still showing some numbers in our construction and process and progress billings equal to the contract value. And so in the very last year, we're going to have to do an extra journal entry. So this is our essentially closing entry, but closing from the point of view of closing the contract. And so I'm just going to make this black and show this over here. And we're going to debit the progress billings, and we're going to credit the construction and process. And so let me just make both of those black right here, and I'm going to move this one over. There we go. And this happens only in 2016, and that's the value of our contract, which is now finished. And I'm going to move this one over here because it's a debit. Just bring this one here over to the left a little bit. Now that we've closed out the contract, and notice there's nothing here in 2014-15. This just happens in the final year. So when we look at our construction and process, I'm going to have to go and deduct this, the $11 million, from my closing out entry, and do the same thing with progress billings, and that closes up my contract completely because it's finished. So that finishes my balance sheet position. So just one last little detail here. When we look at the presentation, what may potentially happen is if you have a negative amount here as the excess of contract costs over billings, if you have more billings than contract costs, what you end up having is a negative number here. That has to be shown as a current liability if progress billings exceed contract costs. This can happen, for example, if the contract required some large payments at the beginning to allow the contract to go and buy some supplies. That would typically happen in the early years of the contract. That finishes the whole process. So now we've gone from our calculations through to our income statement, straight through to the journal entries, and then all the way to our statement of financial position.